Intelligent design is creationism in a very shabby cloak. Dirty, threadbare, wrinkled, lice-infested, and smelly. In my opinion, many ID proponents are likely closeted creationists using intelligent design as a wedge. Both groups, probably, can be divided into two camps. Those who truly believe their position and their explanations for it, and those who know that their explanations are bullshit, but use them for the greater good. They're committing what is known in the theology business as a pious fraud. Some of their explanations are embarrassingly bad, only useful for convincing people who haven't even a high school knowledge of science. And these explanations usually come from people with far more education than that, giving them an air of authority that is not deserved. On that note, let's meet one Jonathan Wells. Jonathan Wells is a senior fellow at the unaptly named Discovery Institute, which is a fundamentalist Christian organization devoted to discovering how best to sway political and public opinion against science, particularly evolution. His past prior to 1974 is of little concern, but in that year he became involved with the notorious Unification Church, which taught that its leader, the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, had been anointed by Jesus Christ to carry on the latter's work. In 1992, he proclaimed himself the Messiah. Humility was not his strong suit. Wells graduated from their theological seminary in 1978 with a degree in religious education, followed by a PhD in religious studies at Yale University. His doctorate in molecular and cellular biology was acquired at the University of California, Berkeley, a fairly reputable institution, so I don't doubt their legitimacy. His subsequent work, however, is not legitimate because his stated goal is to destroy Darwinism, rather than providing any evidence for creation. So he is following the traditional creationist approach, the false dichotomy fallacy. The idea that if you can dismantle one side of an argument, then your own becomes true by default. He is, therefore, no longer doing unbiased science, but instead selling out his credentials to religious interests. His work is guided by religious belief, not science. The following article by Wells is from the newsletter distributed by the Discovery Institute, dated February 2022. First, it should be titled Creation News, because that's what they're trying to do, promote creationism or intelligent design. Second, top scientific problems with evolution is also misleading, because the subject, homology, is not a problem, except in the minds of those unfamiliar with biology who will then fall for propaganda like this. I suspect that any creationists with legitimate credentials know better. They just choose to go with belief instead of evidence.
Evolution News. Top scientific problems with evolution. Homology. Editor's note: we are delighted to present a series
Delighted? You should be embarrassed.
By biologist Jonathan Wells on the top scientific problems with evolution.
I haven't read the other articles in the series yet, but I'm willing to bet that most, if not all, the problems they cite have already been investigated and explained.
Classically, homology meant similarity of structure and position. For example, in the bones of the human hand and the wing of a bat. Darwin considered homologies to be evidence of common ancestry.
And he was correct. Homology is the existence of similar structures performing similar or different functions due to shared ancestry. In fact, with gibbons, it's both. The feet of humans and gibbons perform rather different functions. In humans, it is strictly used for plantigrade walking and running on the sole of the foot. In gibbons, it is effectively another hand, but both have the same bones arranged in different configurations to better perform their function. But when a gibbon chooses to walk upright, it is fully plantigrade like humans. The wings of bats are again modified from the basic pattern, as are the flippers of dolphins and the digitigrade walking feet of dogs. walking on the tips of their enlarged toes.
He wrote in On the Origin of Species, "What could be more curious than that the hand of a man, formed for grasping, that of a mole for digging, the leg of the horse, the pedal of the porpoise, and the wing of the bat should all be constructed on the same pattern, and should include the same bones in the same relative positions." Darwin regarded this as inexplicable if all species were separately created.
Not totally inexplicable. Maybe the creator was rather unimaginative, but Darwin was smarter and realized this might be an important clue about life and evolution.
On the ordinary view of the independent creation of each being, we can only say that so it is, that it has so pleased the Creator to construct each animal and plant. Instead, he argued, homologies were explicable by his hypothesis of descent with modification. If we suppose that the ancient progenitor, the otrotype as it may be called, of all mammals, had its limbs constructed on the existing general pattern, for whatever purpose they served, we can at once perceive the plain signification of the homologous construction of the limbs throughout the whole class. Camera eyes, spines, and more. Yet animals and plants possess many features that are similar in structure and position, but are clearly not derived from a common ancestor with those features. The camera eye of a vertebrate and the camera eye of a squid or octopus are remarkably similar, but no one thinks they were inherited from a common ancestor that possessed a camera eye.
Not so fast, Mr. Wells. The scientific discussion at the moment leans toward convergent evolution, but there is evidence for possible parallel evolution from a common ancestor. Squid, octopi, and humans are bilaterians, animals which evolved with a bilateral symmetry. All bilaterians possess the PAX6 gene, which codes for eye development. Either way, the evolution of a similar eye in radically different organisms is not evidence against evolution. It may be, however, evidence for a stupid designer. As many of you already know, the human eye, and indeed all vertebrate eyes, are designed backwards. The sensors point away from the incoming light, meaning that the light has to pass through them, bounce off the back of the eye before they can be detected. The nerve endings come from the back end of the sensors, meaning that they must all come together at one point called a blind spot, at which the optic nerve goes through the back of the eye to the brain. The cephalopod eye is different. It has it designed correctly.
The spines of South American echidnas.
Whoa, back up. What the hell did he just say?
The spines of South American echidnas.
Yeah, he did. South American echidnas. This guy claims to be a biologist. He claims to know about nature and evolution, and he doesn't even realize that echidnas do not occur in South America. They are a strictly Australasian species, with 3 species in Papua New Guinea and 1 in Australia. For those unfamiliar with the echidna, they are monotremes, egg-laying mammals like the well-known Australian platypus. The egg-laying mammals split off from the placental mammals, like humans, approximately 180 million years ago. Someone must have advised Mr. Wells of this monumental screw-up, because when you look for this article online, you'll find that it's been corrected. However, our old friend, the Internet Wayback Machine, has been able to uncover the original article, and you'll find that, yes, he really did say it.
The spines of South American echidnas and North American porcupines are remarkably similar, yet echidnas give birth by laying eggs, while porcupines give birth to live babies after nurturing them in a womb, like human beings. This fundamental difference means that echidnas and porcupines had very different origins, and they did not inherit their spines from a spiny common ancestor.
And as far as I know, nobody has ever claimed that they had a spiny common ancestor. But all mammals, at some stage in their life, monotremes, placentals, and marsupials, have one thing in common. Something that even you have, Mr. Wells. They have fur, which can be modified into spines through evolution.
The folds of skin between the forelimbs and hind limbs of Australian flying phalangers and the North American flying squirrels are very similar, yet the former give birth to fetuses that crawl into a pouch to complete development, like kangaroos, while the latter nurture their fetuses in a womb, like human beings. Again, they had very different origins.
Yes, we get it. They look very similar, but they have different origins. How does this prove intelligent design? Evolution explains it quite well. Thank you very much.
Examples also include the pits of sticky nectar in carnivorous plants, which apparently originated separately 6 different times. Plants of the Euphorbia genus in Africa have thickened fleshy stems to store water and prickly spines instead of leaves, like plants of the cactus family in the Americas, yet they originated separately under very different conditions.
Wrong, Mr. Wells. Spectacularly wrong. Cacti have spines, which are modified leaves. Euphorbia has thorns, which are modified stems. And they both evolved in hot, dry, sandy desert conditions, not very different conditions. If you couldn't find that with a few minutes of Googling, you're a fool. If you don't think that readers could check your statements with a few minutes of Googling, well, you're a fool. I'm sure that you know the difference, but it's easier to bamboozle people if you omit the facts.
So, similarity of structure and position is evidence for common ancestry, except when it isn't. Modern biologists call similarity not due to common ancestry convergence, and they have redefined homology to mean similarity due to common ancestry.
I am not a professional, and I am not privy to the latest arguments in this area, but to me it sounds as if Mr. Wells is accusing biologists of fiddling the books and messing with definitions to try to defend their case. I seriously doubt that is the explanation for it. They probably, at most, have broadened the term.
Berkeley evolutionary biologist David Wake wrote in 1999, "Common ancestry is all there is to homology." But according to philosopher of biology Ronald Brady, by making our explanation, common ancestry, into the definition of the condition to be explained, homology, we express not scientific hypothesis, but belief.
At the risk of indulging in an ad hominem, I will just say that if you look into Mr. Brady's past, his objectivity seems suspect. He was associated with the Nature Institute, which is a group composed of people who indulge more in navel-gazing than actual research, and they have connections with Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Theosophy, and I would rather not go down that rabbit hole.
Reasoning in a circle. Furthermore, once homology is defined in terms of common ancestry, it cannot logically be used as evidence for common ancestry. To do so would be to reason in a circle. How do we know that feature A and feature B are descended from a common ancestor? Because they are homologous. How do we know that A and B are homologous? Because they are descended from a common ancestor.
This is not the first time that intelligent design advocates and creationists have used the circular reasoning argument. They've often done so with the fossil record. How do we know that this fossil comes from a certain time? Because of the strata it's in. How do we know that this strata dates from a certain time? Because of the fossils we find in it. Well, actually, that sort of reasoning does work. Once you have overwhelming evidence that certain fossils can be found in certain strata, and vice versa, you can use one to date the other. It's quite logical.
Another problem with using homology as evidence for common ancestry is that examples of convergence are widespread.
Yes, examples of convergence are widespread, but that actually buttresses evolution. It does not weaken it.
Cambridge paleobiologist Simon Conway Morris wrote in 2003 that convergence is ubiquitous. He concluded, not only is the universe strangely fit to purpose, but so, too, is life's ability to navigate to its solutions.
Mr. Conway Morris seems to be using Douglas Adams' puddle analogy, which goes like this. If you imagine a puddle waking up one morning and thinking, this is an interesting world I find myself in, an interesting hole I find myself in. Fits me rather neatly, doesn't it? In fact, it fits me staggeringly well. Must have been made to have me in it.
So similarities in structure and position do not provide clear-cut evidence for the common ancestry aspect of evolution.
Sorry, Mr. Wells, but it does. Charles Darwin is in no danger from you or your ilk.